Before we start, a quick note that this episode discusses suicide, loss, and mental health challenges. If you or someone you know is struggling, help is available. Visit findahelpline.com to find support in your country or check the show notes for direct links and numbers to call or text. Helplines are available worldwide. They're free, anonymous, and confidential. You don't have to go through this alone. Hey, it's Matthew Cudmore, and welcome to Story Behind the Stone. How do you create a memorial for a war that spans generations? And how do you give voice to sacrifice that's still unfolding? The global war on terrorism changed millions of lives, and now Michael Rod Rodriguez is leading the charge to build a memorial to the global war on terrorism right in the heart of Washington, D.C. On this episode of Story Behind the Stone, we sit down with Michael, who, as the CEO of the foundation, shares how his own 21 years in uniform led to spearheading this project of national importance. Rod shares his deeply personal journey leading the effort to build a memorial on the National Mall, which will count as its neighbors the iconic Lincoln Memorial and the Vietnam Wall. Join us as we sit down with Rod to learn how this is an effort that's as much about healing and unity as it is about remembrance. Rod, thanks for joining the show, and to our listeners, thanks for tuning in.
Welcome to Story Behind the Stone, where we talk service, sacrifice, and story, connecting you to the most interesting people in the field of commemoration and veteran causes. My name is Ryan. This is Matthew. We are with Memory Anchor, a company dedicated to changing the way the world remembers. And today we are with Rod, and he is the CEO with the Global War on Terrorism, the Memorial Foundation. And I am super excited to have you here today, Rod, because we get to talk about this memorial that you're building, and we're going to get right into that here in a second. But thank you so much for taking the time to be with us.
Well, thank you, Ryan, Matt, for the opportunity. Tremendously, excited to share my dos centavos, my 2 cents on where we're at, what we're doing, and kind of what's next.
Really cool to chat with you today, Rod. And we've watched the foundation's mission come to life. You've had so many milestones this year. Any highlights? Any place you want to start? You confirmed Kengo Kuman Associates, site selection, lots going on in the last 6 and 12 months.
I'll probably start with the shiny object. We're really excited that later on in this year, we're going to be able to show everybody what the initial concepts, what the memorial is actually going to look like. Now, what got us to that was a whole process of doing it in approach to a memorial that has never been done before, to this size and scale in scope, not for the sake of, hey, let's do something different, but really, what drove this approach and what everybody is seeing right now is a plan I wrote down. It's on my whiteboard over there about 6-7 years ago, with some contingencies, of course, that is seeing it unfold. And the overall goal in the building of this memorial was to bring the voice to our nation's capital, to really listen to the people. I always wondered, as an artist myself in post-service, I wondered how many Vietnam veterans did Maya Lin talk to before the designing of the Vietnam Memorial. My father served during the Tet Offensive in Vietnam. He's a Vietnam veteran. As a matter of fact, over my right shoulder right here is my cousin, whose name is on the wall. And that's what kind of drove the entire process.
I think a great place to maybe help our listeners is to understand a little bit about you, because already, like, just looking at your background behind you, you can see a ton of interesting things. But you have a really interesting history and connection to military history in the past. Did you want to share a little bit about that?
So I'm from southern New Mexico. I grew up on the border. I'm from a part of our nation that was at one point Mexico's territory. So my family didn't cross the border. The border crossed us, and we were thankfully on this side of the border. And that's where I'm from. This is my origin. So what you see behind me is an ofrenda. I think most people are familiar with Dia de los Muertos, the Day of the Dead. It's a holiday in my culture where we celebrate the dead and we feel that we're most close to them. It's not like a Halloween spooky doom and gloom thing. It's a time of celebration. It's a period of celebration. So people will sometimes put their ofrendas up during that time. Mine stays up year round. As a matter of fact, if we could zoom out, I probably couldn't do that. But my entire wall behind me is my ofrenda that stays up, and it has family members of mine that you can see behind me, like my uncle right there, World War II. There's many of them behind me, but then particularly right here is a list of friends of mine, personal close friends of mine that I've lost in the global war on terrorism. I don't have enough space for all the photos, so I listed their names as things. So I've served my nation for 21 years. My father served in Vietnam, as I referenced, grandfather World War II. It's just what we've been able to do. The mother of my children served for 21 years as well. She deployed 6 times. I deployed 10 times. My oldest son is currently serving here at Fort Bragg in one of the units. Can't really say. So it's just, apple trees make apples, right? That's kind of how I get around with all that.
You see how passionate you are about that. You have that behind you. And then thinking also to what you're building with this new monument. It's almost, I'm just trying to draw some parallels, but there's a parallel there, isn't there?
Growing up, like we weren't in my culture, and I think this is common with many other cultures as well, is we always celebrated those that we lost. We can't stop that. It's even from a faith perspective, memento mori. I think people have thought about that, but I was always brought up like, hey, remember you're going to die. That kind of gives you that asthma check, like makes you clear on, look, take the opportunities today, live with a little bit of grace, because tomorrow is not promised. I can't change yesterday. But then also when you really think about memorialization as a species, as human species, some of the very first structures ever constructed by the human animal, right, by us, are actually these burial mounds. So that speaks to the nature of who we are as a human species. It's in nature within us to do that. They found burial mounds in these caves that date back, thousands and thousands, tens of thousands of years, more so than the cave paintings and depictions of art. So taking care of our dead is what we do. And we're very unique in that. So that when people open their mind and place themselves in that position of not just being fearful of death, but accepting of it, then it allows us to celebrate those that will face it. Because, we have to say the truth out loud, right? You will die. We're all going to die at some point.
Monuments really do talk a lot about our relationship to death, doesn't it? And it's one of those things that we don't like talking about in our society quite often. We almost put it aside, and yet these cemeteries and these monuments are so important. Why is it so important to us in society to go see these things and build these things?
I think it's important for us to address that and accept that, like what I was referencing earlier, like you're going to pass at some point. But what it allows us to do, whether we lost someone through conflict, right? Like the names over my shoulder of friends of mine that I've lost in the global war on terrorism, or whether it's someone that died of an illness or whatever it is, we can still celebrate them. So it allows us to live on our stories. It's more than just a picture and a bio. It's a story. And, it's, you want to remember them and honor them. I think it's really important for us to go there, but because it allows us to reflect on what we're facing, what we may face. There's always opportunities to learn and welcome that. But you need to place yourself in that position of vulnerability to accept the emotions and process that, whether it's someone that experienced things at war that has come home and realized there's a lot of us that carry around survivor guilt. Like, why didn't I die? Why did my friends die? In same events. So it's important to go there to recognize that, accept that, and do it from a position of love and thanks, not as a victim, because really people will pass. We're all going to die at some point, and some of us will die traumatically in events that we are beyond our control. But that's not for us to really, we can't really control that all that much.
I've always said, if you can just connect with one person's story, that makes all the difference. Like that, you start getting into that space of understanding sacrifice. And I like how you put that, because it's a courageous act in many ways to open yourself to that. Like your monuments, I'm really interested to hear a little more of what it's going to look like, how it's going to maybe support that experience. But it is like, this act of commemorating or remembering it, we have to open ourselves up in a way, and we have to be willing to connect with just the pain, that loss. Like that person had a family, a mom and a dad that loved them, that maybe even had kids and a wife. Like, as a dad myself, I couldn't imagine, losing a child or having my kid grow up without me. And so I love that point. So when you think of what you're doing and how you're building this monument, you're saying you've done it uniquely. Like you've put a lot of thought. You're an artist. You're bringing a lot of your experience, your art, your empathy into this space. How is this going to help people have that experience?
What I think it'll do is it'll make it identifiable, right? So you wore the uniform. right? And I wore the uniform, and we're no different than those that didn't. Right. Oftentimes, people toss this narrative around, which I don't think is true. The civilian military divide, you hear that often. There's no divide. There's a misunderstanding. I am no different than anyone else. I just made certain choices. I'm not special either. I just made certain choices in my life to serve, my nation and provide, and that's just what it is. So I think, making them those that we have lost and those that have served and come home and brought the war home and may lose the war at home, right? We can speak openly about that. 55 friends of mine I've lost, several, more than I care to mention, were at their own hands. So, I mean, speaking about that, but making them real, identifiable people, so you can look at them and be like, wow, they're just my neighbor. For those that may not have served, I think in ancient times, what did the Spartans do? What did the Greeks do when they came home from battle? They enacted theater. They brought the entire people together and they told the stories that allowed two things to occur: allowed those that may not have been there to see the realities of war, to see that, and that their peers were doing that, their fellow citizens, but then also to allow those that may have participated in that to sit alongside those that didn't. So you remind yourself that you're still a community. Humans are tribal in nature. If we were not tribal, we never would have made it out of the caves. We'd still be in caves trying to figure it out, finding whatever animals exist at this time. But going back to the core of us as humans and realizing that's just in our nature, I think it's really important to, I say, bring everyone back to center. Take all the sensitivities that may have existed, the social cultural norms that may have prevented us from speaking about realities, and just place yourself in a vulnerable position. Because if I don't place myself in a vulnerable position, am I really speaking honestly? Am I really connecting you? Because vulnerability is the foundation of human connection.
A couple things you said, and I just kind of want to go back to is just the loss of suicide. I had a brother when I was younger. I was on a domestic deployment for forest fires, and I'd call back, and he was my foster brother. My parents had adopted him. He was my best friend, and his name was Josh. Josh Hodinot, and I like saying his name. But I found out he had died to suicide. And there's so many soldiers, and we see this rate of suicides that are happening. And as you're just talking, it just reminds me, there's a lot of names on monuments, and we have one in Canada here, and there's some soldiers on there who took their own lives. And it's a really hard topic because, one of the things, and I'm just, I always think of is like, that's a battlefield injury. A lot of these people have taken their lives after because of the post-traumatic stress that they're dealing with and stuff. Um, you know, how do we remember those individuals? Because it's almost a taboo topic in our society.
I think it's important to at least say it out loud. I'm glad you shared Josh's name. I wrote it down. I think that's special. I'm going to definitely remember him. So thank you for sharing that. When I started working on this, I would tell people about it. And we're 501c3 charity nonprofit with zero money, just going around. And one the people that were most against this may surprise you or may not, was actually the veterans and their family members. When I would talk about this, they were like, why are you doing it? We don't need that. We don't need that. So I'm talking senior leaders, former chairmen, Joint Chiefs. Like I forced got my way through life, meeting some incredible people. And I would mention this and they're like, no, no, no. And when they say, we don't need that, I said, okay, let me ask you a question. Do you know someone that didn't come home? Do you know someone that may have come home and is struggling right now? Or someone that came home and lost their life through their own hands or some mysterious illness that they should never have gotten? And every one of them would say, of course, hell yes. Yes, they deserve. Okay, cool. You think about them. I will think about you. And the reason I realized that's what it was, because everyone raises their right hand and serves their nation, not for self-aggrandizement. Dang sure ain't doing it for the money. You're not going to get famous doing this. It goes to the core of who we are. You never think about yourself. And that's when I realized how little value veterans, service members, and their families who support them view this incredible service and sacrifice they've given to our nation, to the world. They don't think there's anything for it. They value what they have given. I really understand why this is so important. And I truly believe, or I know, I'm saying, this memorial will save lives. This effort will save lives. It's an incredibly complex, difficult to define war. It's multi-generational. My son is deployed 4 times. He was 4 years old when the towers fell. He's deployed to the same regions of Afghanistan, the Helmand province that I've been to twice, and his mother deployed to twice. What would have been like for my dad to watch me graduate airborne school and go fight the Viet Cong, or my father to complete his training and go fight Nazis or serve in the Pacific, like my grandfather's. When I say it like that, it's striking, but that's the war that we're talking about right now. So the fact that it's just such a, no one really talks about it. They're still out there. They're still serving and fighting, they don't view any value. But as a nation, I will make this nation take a knee in reverence and sanctity and honor them and make them feel valued. When we impart that value, when they learn about the project, they learn about what I've been doing for almost 10 years, when on the day of groundbreaking or dedication, whenever they find out about it, I truly believe they'll feel some type of value because it's coming from a selfless approach. You know what? If someone feels value, you know what they're not going to do? They're not going to take their own life. So that's why I'm running at this as fast as I possibly can to actually continue to save lives. It's a metric. Saving lives is a metric we don't know, but it's a very important mission today.
I think it's so important to give voice and attention and that value. Like you said, the service has value. And you're right. Like, what a strange conflict for the length of it is. You have a generational conflict. I know there's nothing released yet and around what it's actually going to look like and stuff. And I'm not sure if you're allowed to share any of that stuff, but is there any elements that might capture some of what we're talking about?
So right after I stepped in the leadership role, I realized that, okay, how do we stay in azimuth? How do we keep people understanding what this is? So I wrote the 4 tenets that our foundation has, which is honor all those that served, uniformed and non-uniformed. Ryan, you and I were talking briefly before we started, the United States has over 7,000 uniformed service members that have lost their lives in the service of global war on terrorism. In 2019, the Department of Labor in the United States did they to the best of their knowledge and the best of their capability, they try to figure out how many non-uniform individuals who have served or supported theater operations lost their lives. That for us, that falls under the purview of the Department of Labor, not Department of Defense. U.S. companies, whether they work for a federal government agency or a private business, one of the contracting companies, right? And in 2019, they published a report and found that there were 3,400 non-uniform individuals. That's astounding. And 99.99999% of people I tell that to have never heard that statistic. Matter of fact, the very first KIA, very first combat casualty in the global war on terrorism was a gentleman by the name of Johnny Michael Spann. Mike, he worked for the CIA Special Activities Division and was killed November 25th, 2001. He was a Marine at one point in his life, but he was working for the CIA. He was part of Team Alpha, one of the very first teams sent forward following the attacks of 9/11, 2001. Why doesn't people talk about that? I was blessed in my career when we'd go on target doing what it is that we did, as Special Forces operators. There were guys running in after me that looked like me, dressed like me, carrying the same equipment that may not have been in the military. Whether it was the FBI or some of the other agencies that exist, they were there serving, placing themselves in harm's way, increasing mission capabilities and effectiveness. Why don't we talk about that? In addition to that, why don't we really talk about the family service? The most difficult deployment for me was when I'm standing there here at Fort Bragg watching my son, young 18-year-old airborne infantryman, deployed to the Helmand province of Afghanistan. Like I mentioned earlier, I had been there twice. His mom had been there twice. We're standing there. Kelly, his mom, was still serving at the time. I had just gone out. And we're like, what's going on? That was the most difficult deployment for me. So really talk about the family, and as I mentioned, Kelly, I was the one stuck at home. I know what it's like to be the spouse as well. So when she would go to war, I was there with our 3 monsters trying to figure things out. So that was hard. So really I just was blessed to have opportunity to serve in a number of different ways. So it's very important to really tell the whole story on this. And in Washington D.C., just like any other capital across our world, there's a lot of politics, right? I don't talk about politics. I didn't write the policy. I didn't write the policy that sent me to war. None of us did. I don't engage in policy. I don't engage in politics. I talk about people. I share their stories with people and I stay out of that. Am I pulled in all those directions? Absolutely. Do I engage? No, that's not my job. I don't mission creep. I have a mission. This is what we're doing. We're building the round table that bring everyone together. So those tenets are honor, heal. Heal is a subjective term. Heal is a person. Heal personal relationships. Like the mother of my children that I reference, we're no longer married. So my best friend, but that's the way it was. Heal, empower, tell those stories, right? And unite. So the reason I went on that little tirade there for you was those 4 tenets that I just shared with you. Our design team, Kengokuma and Associates, have listened and have transformed those 4 tenets into a physical structure in a manner I could never have even conceived. And the way they did that was our approach to this memorial or building this was unlike any ever done. Typically, what happens is I'll have a design competition, and then you get a board of directors, and then these individual artists will come and their own individual interpretation of the war or memorial or whatever theme that they're designing for, they'll give their thoughts. And as an artist myself, I'm not an expert. I couldn't design it, even with the 20 deployments in my little nuclear family and the 55 friends of mine that aren't here anymore, and my own injuries and stuff. I'm not an expert. I couldn't design it. It would be so narrow for me to try and interpret that. I pulled together a design advisory council of our stakeholders. I talked about Mike a second ago, Johnny Michael Spann. His widow, Shannon Spann, is a member of my design advisory council, as is Mike's team leader, the team leader for Team Alpha. He's a member. We have a chaplain that is a member because there is still a spiritual component to this, whether people want to admit it or not. So I brought this group together to engage with our design team, to tell them what it is, to tell them how they feel, to tell them these stories that are important. It's about these people. But then in addition to that, I captured the voice of the United States because I had a design survey. I started collecting data on what it should look like in 2018. And then a few years ago, hey, let's put it online. Let's see how many people we can get, with the goals of I wanted all 50 states and every demographic from World War II and every one of our services, right? Army, Navy, Air Force, Marines, Coast Guard, and Space Force. Let's get their input. It was a 5 to 7 minute survey. It asked a lot. So I was like, oh, let's just see what we can get. And I'm tremendously proud to say we had nearly 20,000 people fill out this survey. That was added to the aggregate data I've been collecting since 2018. That was given to the design team as well. So the design team engaged with us for nearly a year. Then I let them off their leash and I said, okay, now go forward and design. And through that entire process, they sat back and listened. The reason we ended up with Kengokuma and Associates is I needed someone with the gravitas, professionalism, experience, and portfolio to get into this Shark Tank with me and get this thing approved, right? So we got a huge shark, but there were 3 components that I looked for in building that and finding the right person. One was ability. I said it's got to be a big shark, right? Second thing is credibility. Well, what is their background? Do they work well? Will they fit well with our team on our approach? And the third thing, if there were pillars, it would be the center pillar is humility. You have to understand your involvement in this project's got 0 to do with you. There isn't a single one of us that this is about. It's about the people, not a person. It's about our community and our society as a whole, and what we did in this incredibly complex, difficult to define, multi-generational war. And that approach was how we got to where we are today. And it was a lot of work. I think approach to engaging as the vessel of our voice was the best approach that we've done. And it's never been done. Not, like I said, it's not to this size, scale, and scope. So we're really excited about what's going to be coming out, and the design you will see when it comes out. Those 4 tenets, honor, heal, empower, unite, have been transformed into something physical.
As you're talking, what's becoming apparent is like one person never fights a war. It's always done together. And this idea of collaboration and listening, and those 4 tenets of honor, heal, empower, unite coming through. This is exciting. This is going to be a very unique monument, and I can't wait to see when will people get their first peek at what it's going to be looking like.
Kuma-san and his crew have presented the concepts. The board has decided on one. We're continuing some final studies on it, some adaptations and adjustments as we refine it. And then, of course, I don't want to bore anybody or get into the 12-hour conversation on the 24-step process to build a memorial and museum in Washington, D.C. That's like a weekend seminar I could give you guys. But we have to get this approved through various commissions and agencies in D.C., not elected officials. It would be easier for me to pass another bill. We've passed 2 bills for the House and Senate. I think it'd be easier for me to pass another bill through the House and Senate than it is to get through this process. But I will caveat that all that is I'm glad it's this challenging. I respect the process. I honor the process. And I think it's incredibly important, because if it wasn't this hard, there's no telling what kind of stuff would be built in our nation's capital. And what I'm really excited to share is from a perspective of being again in unique, is we're the only project that has been authorized to be built since 2003 that is in the area called the Reserve, which is the National Mall. That nothing new has been approved. Everything is built on the outside, like the Eisenhower Memorial behind this Air and Space Museum, World War I Memorial, fantastic memorial, just opened almost a year since they finally completed it. That's off in Pershing Park, perhaps appropriately. The center of our nation's capital is the National Mall. More people visit the Lincoln Memorial than any other spot in our nation's capital. The 5 most visited sites in Washington, D.C. is Lincoln Memorial, the Vietnam Memorial, World War II Memorial, Korean Memorial, and then Martin Luther King Memorial. So if anyone that were to look at the map, that is the center as far as visitors, domestic and international. So we're really excited to be able to secure the site we did and do that, because I was told it was impossible. Everyone said that you can't do that. You're not gonna be able to do that. I said, well, I can pass another bill. And they're like, you're not going to be able to do that. And if you want to get me to do something, tell me I can't do it. And we were fortunate to be able to get it across the finish line.
I get that sense just from hearing you speak, and I'm pretty sure on that top list is going to be the global war on terrorism as one of those memorial, as one of those spots for people to visit. And for anybody, go and check out the website, because you can see, the locations. There's a great picture of you and your team standing there on the ground where it's going to be put, and you can see it's a very sacred ground considering where it is. And on that topic, you have like that picture, you have so many people out there. I love that. I get a sense it's a real grassroots. Your team that's been putting it, like how many people have been involved in getting it to where it is?
So really, really small team, but incredibly capable, very dynamic, in building the team from the board on down. There's another component I looked at following the SOF truce, Special Operation Force truce here, is quality is better than quantity. And that's what it is. Everyone is part of the mission along the way. You got to be bring to this table and possess those 3 things that I look for: ability, credibility, and humility. Additionally, I have to raise the 9 figures to pay for this. This is all privately funded. No taxpayer dollars are to be used on this. And I think that's a luxury, because people tell me all the time, Rod, why are we spending money on this? We should be helping the VA. We should be fighting veteran homelessness. We should be fighting veteran suicide. Because there's this misunderstanding or ignorance that people think that I'm the government. So when they tell me that, I'm like, well, who's we? I don't receive, I never refer to our donors as investors. They're part of the team. How arrogant it is me to tell people where to invest their charitable funds. We just provide opportunities for those. So it is entirely privately funded. We'll get there. We got an incredible board, incredible team. So there's the other component to that, like this skinny kid from Southern New Mexico got to figure out how to raise $100+ million, and as a retired Army guy, so we'll figure it out.
So if someone listening to the podcast, like, how can people help?
Please go to our website, sign up for our updates. I promise I'm not going to send you an email every 3 days or every week repeating the same information. No, I value people's time. I always value, that is your most cherished asset. That's an asset I can't get back and I can't buy more of. Time. So I'm not going to spam you. But that's how we keep people updated. And of course, there's always an opportunity for folks to reach out and, donate their charitable funds, whether it be or get involved, whether through time, talent, or treasure. I'll give you an example of how certain corporations or businesses they've learned about our mission, and then they do their own fundraiser, and then, okay, and then we talk about it and we share it. And that's how they get involved, and we thank them for it, obviously appropriately. So there's a number of different ways, for folks to do it. But, I would love for someone to learn about this project, learn about our efforts, and just find 3 veterans or find 3 people and tell them about it. That means the world to me. Is just for us to start sharing this, sharing the mission amongst each other, because you never know the impact that it will have on someone that might be struggling that you don't know are struggling, someone that might need that little touch of, hey man, you're valuable, you're recognized, I love you. That might need that. right? And I think a lot of people do.
I think anybody listening is just taking that to heart, and just kind of going into maybe just honoring the memory of some people that we have lost into their own hands. Like my brother Josh or others you might know. Never be afraid just to ask how someone's doing. And we can be afraid of that. I think sometimes I'm not afraid to do that, and I'll ask my friends. Sometimes it's like, "How you doing? Are you struggling?" And if it's not uncommon to have thoughts of maybe hurting yourself or taking your own life, and if that is like, I'm here to talk to you, and you're not alone. And I think people, and going back to what you were saying, Rod, earlier, is just being seen or witnessed. Knowing that they're cared and valued is one of the most important things.
Be vulnerable and ask those hard questions. Have those difficult conversations, because you'll never know how you will truly impact. And don't be ashamed of it either. We're human beings. It's okay to feel. It's okay to cry. It's okay to hurt. Those are, post-traumatic stress. I spent 8 weeks in an inpatient treatment facility, and I'm not ashamed of it. I was on a number of medications that I needed at the time. And I'm open about it. I'm not ashamed of that. I'm not ashamed of any physical injuries people might look at. Why should I be ashamed of a moral injury I might be carrying? I'm not. I will talk about it freely. And I think we need to have those conversations and share it, and quit judging folks, right? Because you don't know what they're struggling. You don't know what it is that put them in that position. Just provide them the grace that they deserve, and let them know you're there. Because without that support and love, they can't fight those battles, because we can't fight them for them. And just be open and honest about it. Of those that I referenced, that took their lives, loved ones of mine. One was my fiance, who's serving in the Air Force. I lost her to suicide as well. So I will speak about it openly and honor Molly's memory till the day I die. But that we have to do that. It's a duty. I think what we're doing is a duty that we all share, and in doing that, we can celebrate them, we can live with them, but then we can also face our own mortality and realize it's going to make you live with a little bit more grace and every single day.
I wrote Molly's name down, like you wrote Josh, and I'll make sure to say her name. And I think just on that, like one of my big messages to a lot of people is emotions aren't a weakness. Feeling emotion, feeling pain, it's not a weakness. I think a lot of my buddies in the military, there's this attitude is don't take a knee, you always push through it. And that's something we can do with physical pain. But when it comes to emotional pain, courage and strength is actually facing it, is actually being okay to be broken sometimes. And that's not a moral failing. That's not a sign of weakness. In fact, it's the absolute opposite. Your ability to hold on to pain and sit fully with it is an incredible strength. And asking for help isn't a weakness. That means you're committed to yourself, committed to life. Needing help sometimes is, we're human. That's why we work together. We're better as a team. And so if you're ever struggling, asking for help, that's not a weakness. That's a strength, and it takes a lot of courage. Rod, I could talk to you for days on many different topics. Is there anything you'd like to just cover off before we finish up here that I didn't ask, or you'd like to say?
I would just really invite people to learn more about our mission and dive into it. And Ryan, I want to thank you. This is probably the first. I've been blessed to be on a number of different podcasts before, but to really allow me the opportunity to go on the philosophical approach on why this is important, to dive a little bit deeper into it is, oh, you're building war memorial. Well, no, let's talk about it. Let's get a little bit deeper and talk about who we are, because nothing I said could not be said by anybody else. We tell the truth, but we have those difficult conversations. So I would love for people to look at this and perhaps use it as if they can support the mission. Great, talk about it, but also reflect on themselves and be like, wow, okay, maybe I can be a better father, a better spouse, a better friend in some type of way. And it just all comes down to humble approach to life and living with grace.
I think those are great words to end off on, Rod. I couldn't agree with you more. Thank you so much, just for the way you show up in the world, like not just here, but you can just see the authenticity that comes through you. And I think the world needs that level of humbleness and courage more so than ever. And so just thank you for what you're doing. It's inspired me here today. I hope it's inspired our listeners to learn a little more. Hop on the website, and where else could they look up and find more information about what you're doing, Rob?
We're on all various social media platforms as well. Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, and X. So they can find us pretty easy. GWOTMF is you can pretty much find us, or you can Google me. I'm on social media like a teenager, so I do the best I can. I'm not very good at it, so don't judge me. But definitely can engage, and really, I all I look for is a dialogue, like today, an opportunity to find people that will be willing to have an open, vulnerable conversation and talk about what has occurred, what's going on today, and the blessings, the possibility of tomorrow.
As things progress, I would love to have you back on the podcast again, and have some real vulnerable conversations, because that's meaningful. That's where it's at, and why not go into it?
If you're ever in DC, let me know. Please plan a trip. We can do it in the same room. We can there have a conversation.
I would love that. Let's make it happen. And to our listeners, thank you so much for tuning in today. And please check out the show notes. We'll put in the links to everything you need to know about the Global War on Terrorism Foundation, Memorial Foundation, and any other links that you need. Again, Rod, thank you so much. This has been just an amazing time to speak with you.
Thanks so much for tuning in. Story Behind the Stone is available on Apple Podcasts, on Spotify, and on the Wreaths Across America radio network, on iHeartRadio, Audacity, and TuneIn. Just search for Wreath. We air every Thursday at 10 a.m. Eastern on the Wreaths Across Radio Network. Thank you for tuning in.